We're live right now. There's Matthew Brownfield, one of our regulars. Good to see you, Matthew, as always, even though I can not really see you. You can see me, but I can just see your name. But that being said, please feel free to, share some messages and ask me questions and yell at me or compliment me, whatever it is. I'm just so fascinated with human behavior. So it's wonderful to be here. The rebuild life is here. All these amazing Substackers. I love Substack because it is this place where just creatives live. There it is. Great morning, GR8. I love that. I love that. And by the way, the reason why I say great morning all the time, and I've been doing that for, I don't know, like 16, 17 years now, is because I just realized one day, like, why are we so programmed to just say good morning? Like good? Let's move from good to great. So we say great morning. Because the truth is that we're in the beginning of a day, and um, if we can learn how to take control of our thoughts and our feelings and command them, say you will do this today. We will move in this direction. This will matter and this won't matter today. Then we become the dominant forces of our lives, the shot callers of our reality. Because the truth is, we're going to get into some of this today, is that it's who we are that determines how well what we do works. So, who are you this morning? Because that's going to play a big role in how well what you do today works. And the haves that we want, that we need, that we must have, that are on the other side of a big pile of poop all the time, because we're poop navigators, you know, our navigation ability has a lot to do with you know, who we are this morning. And then the second tenet is that it's when we change the way we look at things that the things that we look at change. And that's what needs to be done. If you're working hard and you're doing all of these things that you think that you need to do to have the things that you want to have. Great morning, Tegan. I love that name, by the way, Tegan. Great morning, Jeremy. Jeremy is my son's name, Jeremy. That's awesome. But you know, whatever it is that we think ends up being what we have. It's like thoughts become our realities. So my intention, my purpose with my rise ups, full of fun. There's Lori. Great morning, Lori. Full of fun. Great morning. So my intention and purpose behind these rise ups it's just about recognizing that we live in a world that, for the most part, is doing the thinking for us. Great morning, humanities connections. Oh, we're getting some hearts. Okay, so we're getting some interaction now. This is a lot of fun. I like to feed off of that. And remember, in the message chat, you can say hello. You can whatever it is that you feel like saying and making distinctions. I think it just makes it so much more fun. But we live in a world that, for the most part, is doing the thinking for us. We're all in some sort of an algorithm, and then we've come into this world to this day to day with our programming from our mother, father, teacher, preacher. Society is supplying us the support for whatever it is that we thought. And we've kind of, for the most part, what we do as humans is, it's cognitive bias. We kind of like hang out with the people and hang out in the environment and do the things that support what we think and believe. And we have this ability to label and judge and separate ourselves from anything that is different. So on this show, what we'll do is we're going to take advantage of your brain is what we're going to do. We're going to brainwash you. And that doesn't mean to convince you to think one way versus the other, but we're just going to scrub your brain and wash it and create a blank space and a blank canvas for your thoughts and feelings today so that you can choose them. Remember, our brains are processing 40 to 70,000 thoughts all the time, right? So we have this just really interesting ability to just pick like two or three of them and call them reality. I'm going to give you the opportunity to question things today, to ask questions like, well, what else might be true, Dragon? Right? Or maybe use one of the most powerful words in the world, and that is maybe, or what if. I love one of my favorite questions to ask when I think something is, well, what else might be true? Isn't that interesting? So grab your coffee. We're going to have some fun today with one of my favorite topics from my book. And I got this from one of our listeners, the House of Dragon. Great morning, Walter Penfine or Penfine. Great morning. And by the way, I'm extremely interested in anybody that has something interesting to say and your Substack. So, this live recording doesn't typically show up with all your messages, but when it goes out there and it gets out to your email, I hope that you're subscribing to us. Thanks to all the paid subscribers. I always get to their Substacks first. That's one of the perks of being in the Make Sense family as a subscriber, but specifically a paid subscriber. It's not a lot of money, but what I do as one of the perks is I read their stuff first, and I'll always restack the paid subscriber stuff and make my comments on it and all of that. So great morning, everybody. It's just an honor and a privilege to be here today. It's an honor and a privilege to be alive. It's pretty amazing. I don't know if anybody noticed that this morning when you woke up, that you're alive, which means your potential is limitless. I was away for a week. I was in first Utah, and then I was in Tennessee. I went to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and that was an interesting place, very touristy place. But I saw a lot of bears, and I know that one of our favorite subscribers and guests and family members, he's in the Make Sense Academy as well, our private community that you guys can all check out. His name is Bear Sage. So I saw a lot of bears. So let's get into this today. One of my favorite topics. So let me just give you a little bit of an overview and an insight. This is called Right versus Kind. And, this represents a chapter from my book, and it's a question that set my inner hostage free. So today, you're going to have the opportunity to set your inner hostage free. And what a hostage is somebody that's being kept as a prisoner against their will, right? Well, there's Najami, the bushwoman. Great morning, Najami. I just got your text. I'll read it in a second. So here's the insight. So you get some throat clears on the live. Most people don't realize this, but our obsession with being right is just a cry for validation in disguise. I just love that. So I learned this the hard way. That's the way the dragon learns, by the way, the hard way. And the day that my first ever mentor, and I'm going to share a story with you about that, looked me in the eye and asked me a question that just took down my whole house of cards at the time, which I didn't even know I had erected. He asked me, "What's more important to you, JC, to be right or to be kind?" Now, that question basically dismantled my ego and set my inner hostage free, which is what we're going to do today. And this week's episode of the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast is going to explore what happens when we stop trying to win and we start trying to simply understand. And it's one of my favorite topics. So this is an abbreviated version, by the way, of my book is coming out in a big event in Chicago in February 2026, and that's the Make Sense book, and it's 8 years of work, and I'm just so excited to get it out and put it in everybody's hands. It's going to be a yellow cover with my glasses on it, and we've got a foreword by Jim Quick and a bunch of contributions from some really big people and authors and stuff like that. So I'm really excited about that. And for those of you that are in California on the West Coast, Jim Quick is one of my all-time best friends. He's having his huge Limitless Live. I don't know if there's any Jim Quick fans out there, but he's having his huge Limitless Live event, which will have thousands of people live there in the audience, but it'll be simulcast to like up to 20,000 people live. So yours truly is going to be the MC for that event. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But what I'm about to share with you is an abbreviated story and lesson from this soon-to-be published book, Makes Sense. And it's going to hit the shelves February 2026 at that event in Chicago. So the event that Jim Quick is having is in December of this year in San Diego. He is amazing. Yes, he is. I'll make sure that I tell him that you said that. He loves to hear that. So this is right versus kind, the question that set my inner hostage free. So this is the moment that I stopped trying to win and I started to try to understand. And that was a big shift. Great morning to you, John J. Media. Is that John J. that I know? John J. Wiley? I don't know. Okay, so here we go. So I always like to open up my live speaking engagements, especially in front of a big crowd like this. I always say, "Hi, my name is Dr. JC Dornick, and I'm a recovering bullshit artist. And I've been clean for almost 19 years now." And everybody answers and they go, "Hi, JC," right? Isn't that awesome? So that's how the story begins. So not as a confession, but as a realization that for the greater part of the greater part of most of my life, I wasn't responding to people. I was reacting. And I was reacting to protect my ego. Can anybody relate to that? The difference between responding and reacting. I was reacting most of the time in my life as a means of protecting my ego and the fact that I didn't really like myself. Good morning, Doc. Likely not the John Jay you know. Hey, I'll take another John Jay, but happy to be here. Listen, you can never have enough John Jays, you know? So I was doing that. I was reacting, right? And this was not something that I really had a lot of say in, but I was doing that to protect my ego. I thought I was leading. I thought I was teaching. And I also thought I was helping. I thought I was helpful. But underneath it all, until this happened, I was just trying to be right. So during this phase, this is kind of funny, but sad at the same time. Great morning, John Hawthorne. Please reach out to everybody, reach out to me. I want to know about your Substacks. I want to know what is curious and interesting to know about you. So the best way to do that, I mean, I always start with my paid subscribers. It's not a lot of money, but if you join there, I will obsessively read your stuff and restack it and comment on it and stuff. And we also have a lot of other cool stuff there. So during this particular phase of my life, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I was what you call an assaholic. Has anybody heard of an assaholic? Well, that was me. So let me define what assholism means. So assholism is the unconscious art of speaking without considering the impact of your words. Can you dig it? The unconscious art of speaking without considering the impact of your words. So there's two types of assholes, by the way. And one's much worse than the other, but they're both assholes. So there are two types of assholes in the world. One is the conscious asshole, and that's the one that knows that they're an asshole, but sometimes, well, I'd say they know they're an asshole, and sometimes they even own it, right? They kind of like peacock their assholeness. And the unconscious ones, right? That's the other type. The unconscious ones, those are the people that are entirely blind to their assholism, right? And they're blind to their own reflection in the mirror, meaning they can't see their true selves in the mirror. In fact, they couldn't, in their wildest dreams, the unconscious asshole, can't in their wildest dreams take ownership for their assholism, yet can readily, very, very, very well execute and readily point others out with the disease. Can you dig that? So, unfortunately, my friends, during this phase of my life, when this story happened, I was the latter. So, I want to apologize. Forgive me for I knew not what I did, but I want to apologize to all my friends and family and anybody that ever came into the space of JC during those days. They had the asshole. So, great morning, Tango Pigeon. That's my mom. So, let's talk about this story. I call it the mentor and the mirror. So early in my chiropractic career, I was a chiropractor for about 17 years, I met a man that would end up being my first mentor. His name was Dr. Larry Markson, an incredible man, and I still talk to him this day. I'll never ever finish thanking this guy for what he did for me. So he was a man whose confidence filled every room that he walked into. But as an asshole, I judged him first. When an asshole meets another perceived powerful person, they automatically judged him. They automatically judge him. So I judged him at first, and I labeled him as cocky, maybe even labeled him as an asshole. That guy's an asshole. Remember, I didn't know I was one. I was unconscious to it. But something in me knew I needed what he had mastered. I was watching mastery take place. I guess I kind of unconsciously probably knew that I was an asshole at this time of my life, but seeing another asshole command the respect of a crowd of thousands of people and succeed at the level of his success, just remember saying, I want to know his secrets. I want to know everything I can about this guy. So fast forward, remember this is the revised version, you'll get the whole story in the book. Fast forward a few months after this crazy sequence of events, of just me having no money at all and trying to weasel my way in and pretend that I was successful and work with these people that charged a lot of money. So this sequence of events happened, and you got to read the book for all that. Um, and I find myself later on at his private high level retreat in Montana. It was called the Cabin Experience. It was one of the most extraordinary retreats that I've ever been to. And interestingly enough, for those of you, you never know who you're going to meet at these places, but I met this guy who was like my roommate at the time. And I was like, "Oh, what do you do?" He says, "I'm an author." Great morning, Bear Sage. He says, "I'm an author." I said, "Oh, what have you written?" And he says, "The Monk Who Sold My Ferrari." And I said, "I'd never read it before." It was Robin Sharma. So I got to be at this thing with Robin Sharma, and I didn't even know who he was. So fast forward, I'm at this amazing high level retreat, and I had finally earned a seat, at his table, because this is like for his high level people. And I was a total imposter there. I didn't have the money or anything, but I was pretending to be successful and worthy of it. Um, but I had put everything on the line financially, and there's some valor to that, right? So I just remember thinking at this phase, like, did I really earn a seat at his table, or did I just pay for it? Isn't that funny? Because I thought I was special for being at this event, but I just paid for it. It was expensive, and I paid for it. So at this retreat, which was extraordinary and terrific, I learned a lot. And because of my status there and because I paid for it, I was offered the opportunity to establish a one on one coaching relationship with this guy, Dr. Larry. Now, that's what I wanted. That was my agenda. I wanted him to myself, and I wanted him to teach me the secrets because he was extremely successful and a fantastic, high level communicator and public speaker. So I remember it costing about $1,200 a month, and that would allot me to like 1 hour a week. Right, is that typical coaching thing. Great morning, the Movement Sherpa. That's a great name. That's a great name. It's good to see everybody here. So I remember I had what's called a laughing wallet at that time. A laughing wallet is a wallet that you open up and it laughs at you because you have no money. But I had credit cards, right? So I paid for this $1,200 a week because I knew that this guy had what I needed. So what's funny is I was walking into this, blindly because I was an asshole and this guy was an extraordinary communicator. So on our first one-to-one call, here it comes. I did what any insecure asshole does best. I started talking and I overcompensated, and I began yapping and yapping and yapping about how amazing I was and how powerful I was, just trying to let him know how important I was because I didn't think I was important, right? How powerful I would once become if I just learned the secret password to opening the door to success. And I'm just telling him, I have an hour with this guy. I'm spending money that I don't have. And I'm just trying to convince him that he has just met the Antichrist. Right. And 10 minutes in, 10, 15 minutes into this 1 hour that I have, which ends abruptly, you know, I'm sitting there listening to all my accomplishments, explaining everything that I think that I already know. And right, Tayrod. So he interrupts me all of this talking, which nobody typically did because everybody ran away when I spoke. So is my internet off right now? Can you tell me if my internet just ran off? It looks like it's still running. If somebody could give me some sort of a sign that my internet is still going. Can you still see me? I'll take a sip of coffee. Ooh, okay, it's good. Thank you, Stephen. So he interrupts me and he goes like this. He goes, "Whoa, this is on a phone call, by the way. There was no Zoom or anything like that, FaceTime or anything like that at this time." And he goes, whoa, 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 just like that. And that's what his voice sounded like. He goes, can I ask you a question? And I said, what? He goes, it's my understanding that you have hired me to help you. And I was like, uh-oh. Sea Urchins 101. Love sea urchins. Welcome. Great morning. Is it my understanding that you hired me to help you? And I said, yes. And then he looks at me and he says, I don't know. I hope that we can swear and I hope that I don't offend anybody, but I want to tell you what actually happened. He says, well, then shut the fuck up and listen to me talk for a second. Now, I had never had anybody say that to me. And if you're an asshole, you don't like that. But this guy had what I didn't have. So I shut up. And it was the first time that I shut up in my life. So that was one key right there. I'd never had anyone talk. And nobody was ever brave enough to do that because they knew that there would be a backlash. But in this case, I shut up. So then he asked me 3 questions that would change my life forever. And that's what I want to share with you today. The first question he asked me was this, and I want you to ponder what you would say. And you can answer in the chat. Because remember, this is going to be shortened for a podcast episode on the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast, which, by the way, is blowing up right now. And I never intended it to. So I'm very excited about that. So here are the 3 questions he asked me. First, he said, what do you think people think about you? How would you answer that question? Well, I replied, because of who I was, I said, well, I'd say half the people I interact with like me and the other half don't. That was my answer. And then he said, question number 2, right? He goes, what do you think about the ones that don't like you? And I said, well, I mean, think about this for a second. He asked me what I think about people think what do I think people think about me? And I said 50% like me, 50% don't. And then he said, "Well, what do you think about the people that don't?" So as you can imagine, I was a very insecure. I didn't know I was insecure. That's why I was exhibiting my assholic behaviors. But as you can imagine, in that insecure, self-love struggling state, I said they can go fuck themselves. That's what I said. And once again, I apologize for the swears, but I'm just telling you exactly what happened. So, Substack, if we're not allowed to swear, I apologize for that. But on my podcast, we say a swear every now and then. They can go fuck themselves. And I remember hearing him in response to that laugh. He laughed at that response. And the laugh was indicative of somebody that kind of both knew that I was going to say it. He wasn't surprised that I said that and also recognizing the fine mess that I was. I mean, it was obvious that he was like, okay, I thought you were a mess, but now I know. So he replied and he says, I thought you'd say that. So here it comes. This next question, which I've already kind of, shared with you, changed my life forever. Because there's certain questions that we can ask. And, that's a big part of my book, by the way, is these insights where we think we know something and then somebody asks an effective question and it gives you the ability to look at yourself in a way that you've never looked at yourself and say, oh my God, I don't know. So here's the third question. He says, let me ask you, what's more important to you, JC, to be right or to be kind? So the way I can explain that best is that question didn't just land. It like detonated a nuclear bomb inside my brain. It was like a detonation, that last question. So I want to talk about this interesting need to be right. Now, you don't have to be an asshole or a pompous kind of a person to just need to be right. This is something that's programmed into a lot of us. Great morning, Brant David McLaughlin. Good to see everybody here. Feel free to share this out. So let's talk about this need to be right. It's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you don't know it. Because if you can't catch the fact that you're drifting into that world, well, then you'll never have the opportunity to shift. So I saw it for the first time. So in that moment, what I saw was a pattern. It's like it loaded up in my head. Every conversation that I had carried or that I was carrying with anybody else had an exclamation point at the end, and I never knew that. Not a question mark, an exclamation point. Every sentence excuse me, every sentence that I uttered was a declaration of truth. And I didn't know it. I thought I actually knew those things, but I didn't know that I wasn't open to anything else. They were declarations of truth. I wasn't seeking connection in conversations, I was seeking validation, and I was fighting to be seen. I didn't know I was doing that. And in that fight, what I didn't know, and a lot of us don't know, I made others feel unseen. Isn't that interesting? How we spend so much time fighting to be seen and validated that we don't have the ability to see that we're making other people feel unseen. And they just want to get the hell out of that conversation. So I refer to that moment where he, asked that question as the Vulcan pinch. In the book, it's known as the Vulcan pinch. Now, I don't know if there's any old school Star Trek fans out there. Anybody fans of Star Trek? Great morning, Lisa Morris. Great morning, Cosmic Sushi. God, we had the sea urchins before, and now we have Cosmic Sushi. Love it. Uh, Kinas Chimera. Kinas Chimera. I love that. So I refer to that moment as the Vulcan pinch. In the old Star Trek days, Captain Kirk's sidekick, right, the Vulcan, right, was his name was Spock, and Spock had this combat move. It was played by Leonard Nimoy, if you didn't know. He had a special combat move that he would employ when he was fighting some sort of alien from another planet, where he would just put the perfect amount of pressure. It was kind of silly, but I loved it. It was called the Vulcan pinch. He would put a amount of pressure on your neck and it would render the person paralyzed, right? So that simple series of questions that he asked me, what it did was it took my ego and it rendered it paralyzed. Now, that was a tough thing to go through, but oh my God, it was the most important thing ever. It was like I just couldn't see. You can only see what you can see. So let's talk about the science of validation. So so I started to research this stuff because this was pivotal for me. And obviously there's more to it in the chapter in the book when it comes out. But psychologists call this felt validation. And that's that deep nervous signal in your body that says, I'm safe, I'm significant, and I'm understood. That's why we seek validation. People want to be seen and understood. People want to be significant. Does anybody not want to be significant? Does anybody want to not matter in life? Maybe to different degrees, but I think we're all the same. So, under normal circumstances, when people do feel validated, what it does is it helps them drop their guard down. It's a great feeling when you feel validated. It's like, oh, I don't have to protect myself anymore and prove myself. What happens in that moment, and you're in that moment with me right now because you're in your prefrontal cortex because I'm causing you to think about things. But their prefrontal cortex, when they feel validation, and that's the part of your brain that is responsible for things like empathy, reasoning, they come back online, right? Trust begins in that moment and collaboration becomes possible. So if you want to become a master communicator, you should be looking to validate others, not seek validation. There's a great way of saying that is a master communicator, seeks to understand rather than be understood. I was not doing that. I was trying to be understood. So on the other side of that though, when you're arguing to be right, when you're fighting to be right, like I was as an alcoholic, the brain often, excuse me, the brain of the person across from you, when you're arguing to be right, perceives confrontation and danger. And what happens to them is they shut down and you lose the moment, even if you win the point. It doesn't matter if you win the point. Right. So if you're seeking to be right in a communication, in an interface with somebody, and you're arguing to be right, exclamation point, and there's no room for anything else, you point up at the sun and you say, the sun and the moon are the same thing. They just come out at different times. And the person's like, that's not true. And you say, yes, it is true. That person's going to back away because there's no room for negotiation because you're fighting to be right. So all of that running below the radar of your awareness, you don't know you're doing that. And everyone around you loses, including you. So let's talk about flipping the switch. So when I stopped chasing that rightness, because I was humbled by this moment, when I stopped chasing that rightness and started choosing kindness, which is really just a matter of listening more than you talk, caring before you share, and things like that. So I had to force it in the beginning, but that's what I started to practice. But everything changed. I learned that kindness didn't equate to weakness. That was a concept. I thought that kindness meant that I was weak, right? And I didn't want to be weaker than I already thought I was. It didn't mean that I was surrendering in the conversation. It meant that I was remaining open and curious, which, by the way, is a power move. If you move through this world, and you remain open and curious, you take the right protect switch off of your SD card and you leave it open for other stuff, right? So this is why I wear this hat. It's a cue. It says, and that's a cognitive distancing skill set. But what it stands for is haven't made up my mind. Why do we have to make up our minds about something? I was so compelled to make my mind up about everything and put an exclamation point. So to be kind is to say something like, I don't need to understand. Or I'm sorry. To be kind is something is a way of saying, I don't need to be understood. I need to understand. It's a flip of the switch. So it's a conscious shift from ego to awareness. As a matter of fact, much of the reason that I've spent my whole, you know, greater part of the last 15 years creating what I call the interface response system, which is a big part of the book, but also what we practice. A lot of you are in the Make Sense Academy, and that's our private community. If you want to check that out, just reach out and say, let me check it out. We have a 7-day free trial for that. Um, this interface response system that I created, this was a big part of it because it was there to help me recognize that this conditioned and programmed mind, the nature of my conditioned and programmed mind, and egoic ways as well, they needed to be placed on pause. The idea of saying, we forgive you for you know not what you do, it means that you say things without thinking about them first. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that your conditioned program mind, which is survivalistic for the most part, is calling the shots. You think you're calling the shots because you trust it. So in that pause, so I can validate that I should probably shut up a little bit. Now I needed some help from my mentor. But in that pause, what happened was I reclaimed my freedom. And in the kindness, I reclaimed my humanity. I became a human again. Right? And that's when I could start saying, hi, my name is JC. I'm a recovering bullshit artist, an assaholic, and I've been clean for so many days. Great morning, author Jeremy Evans. Great to see everybody. Please share your work with me. And if you're a subscriber, primarily the paid subscribers, I will look at your stuff first and I will share it and often talk about it on the podcast. So this is a big, big thing. So there's something I want to share with you in this space called fundamental irrationality. If you've never heard that before, maybe write it down. Fundamental irrationality. So it's funny. As a result of my new obsession with all of this human behavior stuff, and I just read like every book. This is just like a year's worth of books behind me. Jim Quick is my best friend. He teaches speed reading, so I read about a book a week. So as a result of my obsession with human behavior and reading endless books on human behavior and the human response system, I learned something really interesting. I learned that we spend most of our time in our lives defending beliefs that we can't prove. Does anybody relate to that? Do you ever find yourself trying to explain something and defend your belief and your concepts about it without any evidence or proof? Of course you do. This is what cognitive bias is. It's called fundamental irrationality. We mistake our programming and our conditioned mind for the truth. What that means is if you just let your knee-jerk reaction react versus, respond, if you let your knee-jerk reaction dictate and call the shots, your brain thinks that you're right because you have this trust and faith in it. So we mistake our conditioning and our programming for the truth, and we protect our fabricated illusions, right? The exclamation point, as if they're facts. And we defend facts that don't even have proof. Do you guys see this happening everywhere in the world right now? I don't have an opinion about who's right and who's wrong. I don't have an opinion about anything. And if I do, and it sounds like I do, I will listen to another opinion. That's where I'm at now. It's been a while. I've been clean. So I learned that real wisdom begins where certainty ends. I need to say that again. I learned that real wisdom begins where certainty ends. And Socrates once said this: I know one thing, and that is that I know nothing. Now, that's not a weakness, that's a superpower. So, to live by that principle is to stay open, curious, and kind. And what it does is it unveils the path of least resistance, to stay open, curious, and kind. And all that might mean for you is to be open to the idea that you might not know everything. Isn't that interesting? Are you open to that? When I'm on Substack and I put up a lot of these quotes, and I always ask people, make sense or can you dig it or write about it? Um, Without even knowing it, people share their opinions. Sometimes they get a little bit nasty. I love that, because it's human behavior and that's my thing. I never take offense to it. But this stuff is happening without us knowing. But right now, in this moment, together this morning, you're thinking about it. And there's a part of you that's going, huh, there's something to this. I don't know if I'm ready to and willing to admit it, but maybe I don't know everything. So here is a couple of final thoughts that I have on this. There'll be a Substack on this as well. And if you want to catch the edited version of this and a whole bunch of other awesome stuff and amazing guests, subscribe to the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. As you can see, I don't have lenses in my glasses. It's part of my whole thing because I don't need them anymore. So here are my final thoughts. Being right feeds the ego, but being kind feeds the soul. Every time you pause, instead of pounce, I was thinking of my cats when I said that. Every time you pause rather than pounce, what you're doing is consciously choosing to evolve. I love the sound of that. Consciously choosing to evolve. And every time you choose kindness, you set your inner hostage free. Remember, I mentioned that. My inner hostage is free. So I'll leave you with the same question that my mentor left me with years and years ago. Well, I'll give you two questions. What do you think people think about you? And what's more important to you, to be right or to be kind? Make sense? So that's it for today. Remember something. If you learned something today, give it away because that's the only way it's going to stay. The highest form of self-actualization and just enjoying the present moment, enjoying your life experience is knowing that you're taking what you love and you appreciate and is helping you grow and sharing it with others, serving humanity. There is no higher form. That's why a lot of you write. Thomas, there we go. We got our first person. Thomas says he chooses kindness. Well, you're my kind of guy, Thomas. I hope to meet you one day. Right? So the highest form of self-actualization is to serve humanity. That's what you writers are doing. When somebody reads what you write and it changes them, it feels good, doesn't it? Feels good. But do we need to be right all the time? So the biggest lesson that I've learned is that I try to listen more. That's why I love to see your comments and I love to read through them. I love that. It's my favorite part of my work is not what I write or what I say. It's what you say and what you write. So that's it for today. Have an amazing day. We've got some great live interviews coming on the Writer's Way on Substack. But I hope that you'll come support the Substack. I hope that you'll support the Make Sense with Dr. JC podcast. And I hope you'll support your goals and dreams as well. So have an amazing day. It's good to be with you. Bye-bye now.